Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathrine.
It's a great pleasure and a great privilege to be invited to speak this morning. Thank you to the organizers of this conference for inviting me. Prophetic voice of the church, speaking truth to power. Prophetic voice of the church. Can the church be prophetic without speaking truth to power? Speaking truth to power means confronting those in public offices in demand for justice and a morally acceptable response to social, economic, environmental, and political problems. Often, politicians are the targeted audience to be told the truth. Whilst they do not object to that reality, I believe we have addressed and talked about politicians a lot in this conference and other gatherings that happened before this conference. In the next minutes, I would like to talk about speaking truth to another group of people in power. As Michel Foucault says, in quotes, power is everywhere and comes from everywhere. So in this sense, it is neither an agency nor a structure. Instead, it is a kind of meta-power or a regime of truth that pervades society and which is in constant flux and negotiation. Therefore, the group I am talking about consists of mainly people who, according to our human understanding of power, they fall below the standard. Nothing about how they live, how they look, represent power. Yet, they are people who put up with oppression, injustice, and unfair treatment day to day. The society have made them to believe they do not have power to change a lot about how they live. Instead, they have been taught how to live with it and be resilient. I am talking about the young people who largely make up the church and the society, which is a reality, I think, for most of the Global South churches. One of the demands in the communique from the consultation in Barbados reads, the renewal of the church depends upon the prioritization of engagement with young people. To raise the need to prioritize young people means we all agree of the existence of a prophetic voice in them. At least that's my own assumption. But it is also true to note that little has been heard from this group. Why? Is it because they do not have the voices, or they just haven't been given an opportunity to be heard? Well, as one of them, listen to the voices and messages of young people in some parts of the communion, and to add on to those that most of us may have had from India, when you saw the videos of young people taking up positions and leading in some projects. Our government is corrupt. Selfish leaders make up policies that benefit only them. We are educated, but we are unemployed graduates. Life is hard economically. It is hard. It is really hard. But that will not stop us from trying and hope for a better life. Our financial constraints are not enough to stop us from attending our annual diocesan or national youth conferences. a place to encourage, nurture, and nourish one another with the Word of God. However, it is said the challenges are getting in the way of other young people to come, as well as for us to go out and meet those who are not yet part of the church. Young people in Zimbabwe meet every year for their diocesan and national youth conferences. More than 200 young people gather. The desire is to encourage one another with the Word of God. But things are really, really hard. Most of those young people, they are not working. But one thing that they look forward to are those annual conferences. Inasmuch as they have heart for mission, inasmuch as they want to go and share the gospel with other people, sometimes they do not know how to do it. Sometimes they do not have the resources to go with to those the young people. But yet, they are ready and they are prepared to go out on a mission. The world is still caught up in a deep sleep, thinking environmental and climate issues are a joke. We are not playing a blame game here, but those in the north are responsible for making policies, some policies that do not just affect them, but that affect us too. And yet they continue to ignore the urgency in this issue. They are not living the effects of this. Even if they do, they are rich and are able to cover that up. But see the damage that happened in Mozambique and Malawi with the cyclone. If it had happened there in the north, couldn't have something been done even before many people were destroyed? How many days did it take for help to come? Inasmuch as maybe there were predictions, was there anything that was done before to avoid people losing their lives? Yet in all this, it doesn't matter. We will not wait for them. Neither are we going to wait for our selfish politicians to do something. But we will take full ownership and be at the forefront of the Anglican Environmental Youth Network. The Environmental Network has its head offices in South Africa. And the young people are at the forefront of fighting and teaching people on how to respond to the environmental challenges that we face. There is civil war in our country. It has been going on forever. Some of us were just born and raised, and the only noise that we know are guns. While other young people are enjoying their youth, we just have to endure being in the bush, being abused, being taught how to fight against a brother and a sister, and how to kill. And when they talk of refuge, they think of us. Do you think we want to leave our own countries? We want to stay in our own places. But we want peace. We want reconciliation. There is no hope in our political leaders. But we know that the church is trying. And we will not wait for our political elders to agree before we start talking about peace. So we are prepared to join in full force the initiatives being made by our fellow church members. Initiatives that bring peace and reconciliation. These are just a few amongst the many voices of the young people. The encouraging stories that they have to share of how they are responding to injustices and oppression of their own governments and social policies. There are many stories to be had, but few platforms to share them. There is energy and zeal to share the good news, but few opportunities to share. There is excitement to get our hands dirty with the work of God, but no mud to play with. There is preparedness to go out on a mission and preach the good news, but no mentors to point us in the right direction. In one of my lectures, our tutor introduced the lecture by saying, an average Anglican today is a young black woman in her 30s or less than 30s in the sub-Saharan Africa. Considering that most of the theology we use is developed by white males in the West, is it fair to continue working with this theology, or it is time to redevelop our theology and listen more to the voices of the young women in Africa? After this lecture, I bumped into a colleague who, from the other side of the corridor, shouted a question. Cathrine, how does it feel to be the voice of Christianity today? Just so you know, I was the only one in that lecture who fitted into the description that had been given about an average Christian. My answer was simple. At least that's what I thought. I said, please, do not ask me about that, because it is a very emotional topic to me. I didn't realize the emotions and anger that could be felt in my voice. But was there something wrong in the description that had been given, or even the question that had been asked? No, not at all. It was the overwhelming realization of the potential that I possess to make an impact in the theological world. But at the same time, it was sad to discover that not many young ladies or even men are aware of this. The church hasn't done much to talk about this. The young women in Africa do not even know that they are the average Christian. Because it's not talked about. The church has not even taken that stance to say that truth to them. Many lay ministers, priests, presidents, ministers are left to make the graves rich. The potential in the young people is just left untapped. And we are just making the graves to be rich. Simply because the church has not spoken the word to unleash the potential hidden in many of the young people in Africa. I know of a young woman who comes from a province that does not yet recognize female ordination. But when the church, in its all fullness, lay and ordained people, questioned and encouraged her to pray and think about ordination at a gathering such as this, or even bigger. With much support, she responded. And she's about to finish her training for ordination. And you know what that means? It meant that she had to leave her home country and go elsewhere to be able to do that. And by God's grace, she said yes. She did left her home country. But it only happened because other members of the body of Christ had prompted that question in her. If they had not, she would still be there, believing in her own potential, but not able to act on it. Christianity in Africa has become flooded with prophets and apostles. It's possible that you may know me today as Cathrine, but I can just wake up tomorrow and tell you that I'm now Prophet Cathrine. Get it right. I don't doubt the power of God in transforming those that He calls. But if the message to be heard from them is only centered on prosperity and bringing fame to the speaker, without challenging the unjust structures around, then are they prophets or they are not, or they are prophets? If we can't stand to tell each other the truth and let our young people be exploited out of desperation and trust even in some of these men and women of God, then where is the prophetic voice of the church? Not many of us within the church have the privilege of having an audience, even with leaders. The same with bishops, archbishops, sometimes priests. But sometimes these opportunities arise for young people through their participation, be it in sports, poetry, or any other projects that attract the public leader's attention. But are we raising a generation of young people who are groomed and nurtured to speak the truth when those opportunities come? Or we are just allowing other members of the body to remain weak, but still expect the church in its all fullness to have a prophetic voice? In Zimbabwe, there is a junior parliament made up of high school students. When they get those opportunities, do they speak the truth to power? Or they try and change themselves to suit and be like those who are in power already? Have we done enough to speak to them that you can be who you are and challenge what Even if you are a child president, you can challenge what the national president is doing in your capacity. In his books, Living Without Enemies and A Nazareth Manifesto, Sam Wells explores 4 models of social engagements, that is, working for, working with, and being for. But I would like to draw your attention to 2 of them and suggest that they are models that we use hand in hand in dealing with young people. Working with. Working with seeks to empower the dispossessed while building up the momentum. It seeks a win-win situation between the highly skilled and the lowly skilled. It locates power in coalitions of interest, initially collectives of the like-minded and similarly socially located. And eventually, it builds partnerships around common causes. And being with seeks never to do for them what they can perfectly do for themselves well, but perhaps with encouragement and support, they can do even more. But most importantly, being with seeks to model the goal of all relationships. It sees problem solving as a means to a perpetually deferred end, and instead tries to live that end, enjoying people for their own sake. Take note of the importance of the word with. Working with, being with. We must cease once and for all to describe the effects of power in negative terms. It excludes, it represses, it censors, it abstracts, it masks, it conceals. In fact, power produces. It produces reality. It produces domains of objects and rituals of truth. Therefore, instead of speaking the truth to power, perhaps it is time for the church to start to speak truth with power. But what does speaking the truth with power looks like for a church with the prophetic voice? In the book of Daniel, we read stories of the young man Daniel and his friends Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Though they were living life in exile, rooted in the teaching of their faith acquired while in Jerusalem, when the time came to challenge the king, they spoke the naked truth as it is. Most of our young people are living life in exile. Exile, not just because they are away from home, but some are living life like exiles in their own countries. But are they able to speak the truth as it is? So, it means that as a church, we need to recognize the sovereignty power of God in all that we do. In the same way that Daniel and his friends put God first in all that they did. Usually we fall in a trap of excluding God. When we talk of power, we only think of power in the politicians or power in our church leaders, and we forget the sovereign power of God. So we need to start from acknowledging the sovereign power of God in everything. And after that, we need to call out our church leaders to stop talking about young people, just talking about young people, but to walk their talk, beginning with some of our African bishops, or maybe other English bishops as well, I don't know. This excludes those who are in this room. Who find trying to attend all other events, but never find time in their own diaries to be with the young people. They will make statements. We want to work with the young people. But they will never have time in their diaries to go and be with the young people. Remember, what you do for us, without us, is against us. We have a challenge to unleash the potential in our young people by calling it out even when they do not realize it, and including them in all the projects that we carry out, even as Uspg. The extremes may be not partnering with a diocese or an organization that does not show a clear plan of how they will involve their young people. That's the extreme. The young people are not the church of tomorrow. They are the church of today. They may not have the leadership positions today, but it's always important to have them in the room. You can't expect me to be the next CEO of Uspg when I didn't know how to even chair the meetings, when I was not there to see how other people were doing it. And training comes in just being there and observing and learning from the leaders doing it at that time. When the time comes, we know what to do. We need to invest in nurturing the prophetic voice at all levels through mentoring. It's something that we do not take seriously, but we need to think about what does mentoring means. If I look in this room, every empty chair for me represents a young person that some of us we did not bring as mentors. If we were mentoring some young people, we should have brought them with us, and they should be the ones sitting on the empty chairs that we have in this room. And we need to release the prophetic gifts in these young ones. When you speak on their behalf, speak in their voice too, affirming their needs and encouraging growth in other spiritual gifts too. Sometimes the young people may make noise, even challenging the political leaders. But when the time comes that us as leaders, we are given the platform to comment on those issues raised by young people, we speak with a voice that is against what they are saying. But sometimes we need to affirm what they say, and we need to also speak with their voice. And here in the UK, please mind my views are just biased on my experience as an ordinand. We need to challenge the ignorance in this country. We need to challenge the I don't care attitude in our young ones. For example, Uspg are doing a great and amazing job. We are contributing to other ordinance going out there. But how many ordinance did we invite for this conference? How many ordinance are here? And what does that mean on the attitude of our theological colleges? Are we doing enough to contribute to the mission modules in our theological colleges? Where some colleges, mission is just about the UK and nothing about the UK. It's just UK, 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 and UK. There's nothing beyond that. In as much as Church of England is part of the Anglican Communion, nothing is said about what other parts of the Anglican Communion are doing. And what are we doing to challenge that? What are we doing when we are training church leaders who are also going to be ministering to people from different cultures? Believe it or not, many of our ordinands don't even know what Uspg is. And perhaps it is time for us to rethink how to break that silence. Is it just enough to put the pamphlets in the church times? Is it just enough to email to the principals? Or it is time for us to be radical? If they don't invite us, we invite ourselves into their colleges and introduce ourselves. What else can be done? As Uspg, what can we do to contribute to the mission modules in our colleges? To conclude, I quote Tom Wright, who on the same subject he wrote, "If the church is to exercise a prophetic gift towards the world, this will require further prophetic ministries within the church itself, to challenge, to confront and correct, as well as to endorse what has been said, and so to ensure the good standing of the church itself." Prophetic voice of the church is not only in words, it is in deeds as well. As they say, action speaks louder than words. Perhaps now is the time to act more and talk less. Speaking truth to power means speaking truth with power. The power of God and the power of all people on the grassroots. The power within the young people. This is not a call for some of us, but it is a call for all of us. Thank you.